to the 37th Annual Teaching Conference. I'm Heather Dwyer. I'm a Senior Associate Director at CELT, the Center for the Enhancement of Learning and Teaching. And I'm here with my colleagues, particularly Carrie Cardamone, who is co-chairing this conference with me. And she'll be managing the Zoom folks. So we've got, that we're running this conference hybrid. We've got folks in the room and some folks online as well. So we're so glad to be here with you today to celebrate teaching and learning, to acknowledge the hard work that you've done this year in what's been a pretty tumultuous academic year. But not just to celebrate, but also to explore our thinking around teaching and learning and to expand it and think about how to take it further into the coming year. So today's really about acknowledging a lot of the work that we've done together and exploring it further. We have a lot of folks to thank today in the making of this program. First, I want to thank Paul Bergen and the AV team for their assistance in helping us set up the room, making sure we have this beautiful space. If you haven't been in Eaton Hall before, it's newly renovated, and we're so glad to be able to be in this room today. And there are AV folks who will be helping us throughout the day in their support. I want to thank the Office of the Vice Provost for Education, including Chidem Talgar and Mary Davis, the University Committee on Teaching and Faculty Development, which includes the subcommittee that's organizing this conference. If you're on that subcommittee, would you mind just to stand up real quick? Because you are here. Thank you. Thank you so much, folks. Really appreciate all your help. And Beatrice, who might be out at the registration table. Yes, there she is, walking by. She has done a lot of work on this too, as well as CELT and Educational Technology Services and the catering and facilities staff. So thank you all so much for coming together to make today possible. We are going to set the stage for today's conference with a little bit of an icebreaker poll. So if you opened that QR code at the very beginning to the program, there is a link in there if it's difficult to see it, which it probably is, on the screen. But what we want to invite you to do is think for a moment about which factors have been most influential, and that could be challenges or benefits in shaping your teaching experience this past academic year. Thank you, Carrie. And this will populate into a word cloud. So just take a moment and we invite you to reflect for a few seconds on this question. Okay, so we can see this is a big word cloud. But I think we can see some themes here because I think a lot of these words are related to each other. I'm seeing, I mean, obviously AI is emerging as a big one, as well as climate, politics, political environment. Federal actions, uncertainty, technology, climate. Climate could probably refer to a few different things. Tired, online, distractible. M-O. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure how that emerged. So thank you for your reflections here. I think a lot of what I'm seeing here reflects not only your experiences, but the students' experience as learners. And so I'm going to flip to the next slide because our students are experiencing so many of the external and internal factors that we've just identified on that word cloud. So some of the factors that are illustrated here include geopolitical instability. I think I saw that in the word cloud. Distraction from technology. I think I saw that in the word cloud too. Political polarization, lingering effects of the pandemic, anxiety from climate change, and all these factors create a constellation that will impact not only students on a psychological level, but on a neurological level, as research is increasingly showing, which will affect the ways that they can engage in deep learning and critical thinking. And that's really important for us as educators to think about as we create the learning environments that they are engaging in, thinking about how to best support them, but also draw upon their many strengths. So this is sort of the landscape that we're thinking about as we decided on this year's conference theme. And we were also thinking about what are the kinds of tools that we can draw upon to leverage students' strengths in this type of environment, in this type of climate. And the science of learning can really bring a lot of powerful tools, not only to help engage students when they're managing all of this cognitive load, both external and internal, but again, to really draw upon students' strengths because they're bringing so much to their learning experience as well. So today we're going to be thinking a lot about this, how we're engaging the students of today. And our keynote speaker will be delving into the science of learning around this topic. And then following our keynote address, we'll have concurrent sessions facilitated by the folks in this room and online. Not specifically necessarily about learning sciences, but more broadly how to engage the students that we are working with and educating today. We're so excited that you all are here. Who is here? So we've got folks on Zoom, folks in person here on the Medford campus, and you can kind of see a little bit of a breakdown based on school that we created based on the registration. So thank you so much for being here. We've got a big turnout from all the schools really, and we appreciate that you are present and willing to celebrate with us. Okay, so if you didn't get a chance to open that conference program, I invite you to do so now. And then I'm going to go briefly over today's schedule so you know what to expect before passing the mic over. Okay, so we will spend the next short while with continued welcome remarks, and then we'll invite our keynote speaker up. Then we have 2 rounds of concurrent sessions. So each round is 45 minutes, and we'll have breaks in between. And then we'll close the day with lunch and award ceremonies from Chris Strange and ETS. And we'll be back in here. So you can see if you are in person here, everything will be in this building. The concurrent sessions will be in the classrooms that are just around the corner. And then we'll come back here for lunch. If you are on Zoom, then based on the concurrent session that you decide to go to, you'll need to click a link to register and you'll get the link for that, and that is in the program. So please let us know online if you have any questions about that. And I'll also just note that lunch is a little bit on the later side, and so we will have snacks for you after the keynote address. All right. I think I am now to pass it over to Dr. Chidam Talgar for some opening remarks. So welcome, Dr. Talgar.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to what is probably my favorite time and favorite day in the year. You know, yesterday, was it yesterday? No, on Sunday during graduation, as I was sort of running from one graduation ceremony to the next and really trying to prepare my thoughts, I couldn't help but think to myself, Tuesday. I'm going to be with family on Tuesday. And that is what I feel like this conference is for me personally, and what I always hear from many of you when we reflect on the year or when we anticipate the coming year is coming together at the end of the year. And as Heather mentioned, this year has been tumultuous. And when we looked at that word cloud, which I like word clouds, this was probably one of the most impactful for me. And what I saw was, yes, AI was in the center, and that has been this kind of consistent sort of impact that we were seeing. I also saw political as a word that came up. But what I also saw was that the size of the word political got smaller much faster. and the size of the word student took it over. And I can't imagine a better place to be today than here at Tufts University. What has been happening over the last few months, particularly in the last two months, has shaken all of us to the core. But this conference and all of you in this room are the reason that we are standing so strong today. So I wanted to sort of use this community that we have as an example of what resilience looks like for an institution, for an individual, for our students, and the importance of community to be able to do that. And so amidst everything that we've been going through, I think when we look at the difference between sort of what's happening above the water and what's happening below the water, what we see is that you as our faculty, you as our educators, have been the bedrock as we've taken on a lot of change over the last few years, and really been able to take, absorb, process, and bring it to our students in ways that help them process and manage the cognitive load that they are living with. This community is also a perfect example of how this university is evolving, the cross-institutional collaborations that even in my 2.5 years that I've been here, I have had the opportunity to observe as growing. You've been doing this for years, for decades. This is not new to you. But you are the example of the opportunities that now this institution can take advantage of to really connect us as a whole across campuses, across our schools, across our colleges, across our global footprint, to make us even more resilient. And so I just want to thank you for being such an incredible model for the entire institution, for what collaboration and community looks like for our leadership, for our fellow administrators and faculty, and importantly, for our students as well. And then lastly, I think that the other thing that really excites me about this community is that you guys can take a joke. So I started this tradition last year by offering you a joke as an opening part of this day, and I thought that I would attempt to do the same this year. Last year you laughed, so I'm hoping that a similar thing will happen this year. One of the things that I have in common with our keynote speaker, Dr. Pooja Agarwal, is that we're both cognitive psychologists. And when I was your research is in the area of memory and retrieval, mine intersected with memory and attention. And so a lot of the work that I have done has been really evolved into looking at how students are able to both pay attention and not be distracted by things like technology. But more importantly, if we understand how they're distracted, we can bring them back into the excitement that we're trying to offer them in our classroom. But when I was doing my doctoral work, I had one of my professors was another cognitive psychologist, and he talked about how there's short-term memory, which we all know. There's long-term memory, which we all know, and we'll talk about today. But there's this phenomenon that scientists really have trouble really explaining, and it's this phenomenon of midterm memory. And it's really exciting because it really defies everything that we know about what memory is supposed to be like, right? You absorb information, you're able to connect it with other experiences, and then that information should be readily available to you moving forward. But that's not the case for midterm memory, because midterm memory is something that is developed in maybe like 2 days, maybe 1 day, maybe a few hours. And then the minute that the student has to retrieve that information, and they have retrieved that information, it disappears. commonly known to really come out right during midterms, and I wonder if that's why it's called this. But it's a real miracle. But in all joking, good, you left. So this is good. 2 years, 3 years will be a theme. But it's really exciting how the way that we engage our students, the way we excite them, the way that we inspire them is so critical to the ways in which they not only remember you, remember the work that you try to inspire them to follow, but also the connections that they've made in their classrooms. And another, just to finish off, another colleague once said, if you ask students, what do you remember from college? What content do you remember? It's vague. But if you ask them, who do you remember? They they remember all the people who really impacted them, and those are you. And so I really truly want to thank all of you for what you have done over the last year, but also just what you give to this community day in and day out. I also want to thank my colleagues at CELT, Dana, Heather, Jean, Carrie, and Beatrix, who, who really work day in and day out to be able to bring you what is happening at the cusp, at the leading edge of learning sciences. And also really thank ETS and thank Technology Services. This environment and the ways in which we're integrating technology is just really, really superb, very intentional, very meaningful. And again, thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal, for joining us today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all about how wonderful today is going to be. And thank you again.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning to folks online. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Agarwal. For those of you who know me and those of you who attended any of the book clubs, you know that I'm a huge fan and that her work has impacted a lot of my thinking, and a lot of the things we've done at CELT have derived from her work. Dr. Agarwal is an associate professor of psychology at Berklee College of Music. She's a nationally renowned author. She wrote Powerful Teaching, Unleash the Science of Learning, which was our CELT book club book. It was the most well-attended book club we've had in 5 years. And more recently, Smart Teaching, Stronger Learning, which is a short book. It has practical tips, and so you should get it. A shameless plug. In addition to her published works, she disseminates practical information through her website, which is called retrievalpractice.org. And we'll see if you can remember that and then use it. And this is something, a website, a resource that's accessed on a global scale. Her work has been recognized by the United States Department of Education, the National Science Foundation. She's been featured on NPR, in the New York Times, Scientific American, and very notably, the CELT newsletter. You didn't know that, but I thought you should. As I said, in the last year, her work, and particularly her resources from retrievalpractice.org, have had such a significant impact on me. And thus, I've brought that to our work as a team at CELT. And I think that partly it was we were really recognizing many of the things that Chidem just talked about, sort of the stressors, the pressures, the fatigue that you all live with on a day-to-day basis, and the amount of giving and caring that goes into your work. And I think it was an attempt to give faculty across the institution techniques and strategies that were easy, that didn't require you to radically change your pedagogy, where you could implement a few things into the course of your class, your lab. It could happen as you were rounding with students in a clinic, and that you could help them deepen their learning, but also be able to then forward that learning into something with some more sophistication, which is what a lot of you are searching for. And then you don't have that moment of, oh my gosh, we spent an entire semester talking about this and they don't remember any of it. And then your heart sinks, your soul dies a little bit. So some of this was about how could CELT help support your soul remaining intact. I hope we were even a little bit successful. Here are a few fun facts about Dr. Agarwal. because I love fun facts. And there are many, but I just chose 3. Her favorite movie is The Princess Bride. Do we have any people here who love The Princess? Uh-huh, I know. She is a twin and she has a twin brother. So do not ask her if she's an identical twin. My husband's a twin. They don't like being asked that question. And the last is that she can play Happy Birthday on the accordion. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Pooja Agarwal.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here, and a very big thank you again to all of you for having me, to Tufts, to the Office of the Vice President of Education, to the big SELT team. Can we please, before we continue, give a big round of applause to the SELT team? Can you 4 stand up, please? Give them a round of applause. Thank you. So it looks like you have a fantastic day ahead of you, and we're going to jump right in. Again, my name is Dr. Pooja Agarwal. I use she, her pronouns. I'm going to tell you a bit about myself, but then we're going to dive into all of you, and I'm excited to learn a lot about what you do here. We're going to get warmed up with a trivia fact. Those of you from the School of Medicine, I expect you all to get this correct. So I've got a trivia question. Then I'll give you 3 options. So don't say the answer out loud yet. I'll give you 3 options, A, B, and C, and then we'll just do an old-fashioned show of hands for which one is correct. So here's the question. How many bones are in the adult human body? I see some people nodding and some people shaking their heads. How many bones are in the human body? Is it A, 124? B, 186, or C, 206, 206. So if you'd say it's A, 124, raise your hand. No brave souls? Thank you, Heather. If you'd say it's B, 186, raise your hand. Thank you. I just heard this. I was watching 6 Feet Under yesterday, if anyone's seen that show. And there was this reference that we have more bones in our foot than anywhere else in our body. Is that true? Oh, cool. I learned something from 6 Feet Under. Okay, and if it's C, 206, raise your hand. Well done, Tufts faculty. It is 206. Now, let's continue. I am a cognitive scientist, as Dana mentioned. I've been conducting research on how students learn for 20 years. I got my PhD at WashU, Washington University in St. Louis. And I've continued my research with a number of colleagues that I'll be sharing with you today. I'm also a teacher and a faculty member right down on the E line to the other side of Boston by Copley Square at the Berklee College of Music. I've been at Berklee for 10 years. If this reference is meaningful for you, I teach a 4-4 course load. I have about 200 students every year, and I deeply, excitedly invite you to come see me, teach my classes, and meet my students. I'm seriously like a 10-minute Uber ride. So I invite anyone to come observe my classes and hang out. My only rule is that you have to participate. So I've been conducting a lot of research on learning. I'm not going to talk about that today. I've taken 100 years of research and distilled it down into 4 pictures without any graphs or any pie charts. I want to talk to you about teaching. And as Dana mentioned, as Heather mentioned, small things you can do to make a difference for your students in your classroom without redesigning or revamping anything. So here's some of my students at Berklee. In case you're not too familiar with Berklee, has anyone heard of Juilliard, the conservatory? Berklee is like Juilliard, but cooler. I don't know anyone at Juilliard, so please don't get me in trouble. And I know this is being recorded too, so really don't get me in trouble. At Berklee, we focus on contemporary music, jazz, soul, rock, R&B, K-pop, Latin music, everything that is not, for the most part, classical music. That is where I learned how to play Happy Birthday on the accordion. I took accordion lessons that started right before the pandemic. So then I had the experience of Berklee students of learning a musical instrument on Zoom, which was a lot of fun. I wanted to mention about 40% of my students are international. We have a very large international population. About 30% are English language learners, and I'll be sharing some of those strategies with you. I wanted to mention that all of the, if you'd like to QR code this, all of the resources I'm going to mention are available at the special website, retrievalpractice.org/Tufts. So everything will be there for you. You can download some resources that Deanna mentioned. You could subscribe for my newsletter. I've got information about my brand new book, Smart Teaching, Stronger Learning. I also wanted to share that all of the slides will be added to this website, retrievalpractice.org/Tufts. All of the slides will be sent out through CELT. This whole thing is being recorded, so I invite you to put your phones away and put your notes and pens and pencils away. I know lunch is in a while, so if you want to grab pastries or more coffee, I'm not offended. I'm a coffee drinker as well. So please don't take notes. I'd love your full attention, just like we like that from our students. On the website, if you'd like, there's also a button that says Ask a Question. We'll have time, we'll talk about teaching strategies, we'll have some time to talk about Q&A, I'll talk a little bit about research. So as you have a question, you can click on that button at retrievalpractice.org/Tufts and type in your question, and then we'll get to that. I use a platform called Slido. It's similar to Poll Everywhere and Mentimeter and so on. Okay, so I'd like you to think back to your own educational experience in college. And maybe the people you remember, and maybe not all the things you remember, but think back to a course in college you had to study really hard for, where you had to cram, you pulled all-nighters, there was so much to memorize. Back then, we all had index cards, right? You're flipping through flashcards, you were cramming. This studying process is not fun, it's anxiety-provoking. What classes are you thinking of? Carrie, what class are you thinking of? Oh, bad timing. Intro to astronomy. Jean, how about you? Oh, did you ever read the book the night before or write a paper the night before a deadline? Yes, okay. So we might study or try to remember, try to cram, try to complete assignments by the deadline. And for many of you, you did well. Hooray! All that cramming paid off. You crammed, you spent a lot of time and energy, you did well, you got good grades, and then what happened? You forgot everything. It's like this oops moment, the midterm memory, right? You've got that memory for your midterms and then it's all gone. And this is really frustrating for our students, really frustrating. They put in so much time and energy into this whole process and then forget it all. And of course, for us as faculty, this is incredibly frustrating. How often our students say, well, I didn't learn that, or I didn't remember that, and then we have to reteach and review over again so that we can catch them up to speed. This is frustrating for all of us, and this has driven a lot of my research, is the question, why do students forget? We all want to remember everything, or at least some things. We want our students to, so why do students forget? And one of the reasons why is because we typically focus on getting information into students' heads. This is a stage of memory we call encoding in a very simplistic model. And encoding is what you're doing right now. You're listening to me. Encoding is what happens when our students are reading their textbooks, when they're watching YouTube videos. That's focusing on getting information into their heads. That's great, it's the first stage of learning, but what we also know from more than 100 years of research is the magic of learning and memory also happens when we get information out of students' heads. So we typically focus on getting information in, and we as professors and teachers and faculty need to focus on getting that information out. And we call this retrieval practice. The retrieving, kind of like a golden retriever, going to get something and to bring it back. Me thinking about 6 feet under yesterday is retrieval. I'm just simply taking a little mental time travel to retrieve that bit of information and to bring it forward. I was chatting with Jean about a trip I took to Japan 2 years ago. When we talk about favorite trips, podcasts we just listened to, that's all retrieval practice. And my students at Berkeley are really good at this. They have to practice their instruments. They're really good learners. I'll be sharing more about how they learn and how they study that we can encourage all of our students to do. But musicians know they have to practice. They have to practice and get information out in order to get better. So with my music students at Berkeley, when they come in for the first day of my intro psych class, social psych, cognitive psych classes, I share with them, just like they practice their instruments, in my class, they have to practice their knowledge as well. And we engage in a lot of this retrieval practice throughout the semester. One of the simplest things you can do, in line with 100 years of research, without revamping a single thing in your classroom, is rather than starting class by reviewing, all right, class, here's what we did last week, is to just simply ask them, all right, class, what did we do last week? It's just switching from reviewing to retrieving. That 2-second moment for students to close their eyes and think. It doesn't have to go into a whole class discussion. It can just be giving them maybe 30 seconds to mentally think about and to retrieve what they learned or anything they can remember before you continue your lesson. So switching from reviewing to retrieving is really powerful for students' long-term learning. You may be familiar with this phrase, a brain dump. It's asking students to write down everything they've learned or everything they can remember from a lesson or a unit or a chapter. In the scientific literature, we call it free recall. There are a lot of different phrases you and your students could come up with for this, but a brain dump is just asking students to write down everything they can remember or type it out. Research shows this helps students not only strengthen their memory, but it helps them organize information. And it also provides this kind of semantic network. Once students start retrieving one thing, then they retrieve another thing, and then they retrieve another thing. So brain dumps, again, simple, quick technique you can use in your classrooms. Another one is to just ask students to retrieve 2 things. I like this in my class because it's a bit more quick, constrained, concrete to just say write down or remember 2 things that you've learned about childhood development, that you've learned about neuroscience, that you remember from social psychology. Oh, it could be 2 things, it could be 3 things, 4 things. I just like the alliteration. So it could be as many as you want. Now, you might ask students, or as an exit ticket, or maybe if you're driving children home from school and you ask them, what did you learn in school today? And they say, nothing. So here's a better question to ask them is, what did you learn in school yesterday? And all of a sudden, that's a really fun mental challenge. If you ask me what I did last weekend or even, 3 days ago, that takes me some effort. But it's still a little more fun than remembering what I learned today or what I learned yesterday. And this is a strategy we call spacing. So you can take retrieval practice, getting information out, having students practice, and kind of level it up, add to it with spacing. So an exit ticket, what did you learn in class today, is retrieval, but make it even more challenging by asking, what did you learn in class yesterday? If you use think, pair, share in your classes, can you raise your hand, please? Yeah. You give students a prompt to think about, they pair up with a buddy, and then they share with the whole class. Here's a photograph of my students at Berkeley engaging in think, pair, share. We might use this in every class or just kind of toss it in as part of that improv. What I've noticed over the years is that we, myself included, skip the think step. Don't skip the think step. That's where that magic of retrieval happens. I totally get that we love when our students are talking, when they're engaging, when there's that buzz in our classroom, but don't skip the think step. If someone walks past your classroom and it looks like your students are all staring at the ceiling for the answer, at least they're engaging in that think moment. And it's going to feel awkward. The longer you give students that silence is golden to think through what they're about to say, the better. What I do in my classrooms with this is, again, I'm a big fan of old-fashioned paper and pencil. Also, it helps get around AI in the moment. And my English language learners find this particularly helpful because they've had time to think before they feel like they're on the spot with their buddy. And definitely before they're speaking and sharing with class. If they have something written down in front of them, they feel better prepared for a richer discussion. Now, of course, you know your content best. If you teach STEM courses, language arts, history, pool billiards, we were talking about, athletics of some sort, you know your content best. So even with these few simple strategies, this is where the creativity of us as teachers comes in, is taking some of these simple strategies and adapting them. So maybe a brain dump makes more sense for literature, but might not make sense for intro astronomy. but maybe 2 things makes more sense for intro astronomy. So as I continue sharing more strategies, please think about your creativity and how you can adapt these for your classroom. Now, you might already be skeptical. I'm a skeptic, I'm a scientist. This is born in me. So you might be skeptical. Maybe you're thinking, is this going to require more prep? And I'd say absolutely not. Just that switch from from reviewing to retrieving doesn't take any extra prep. Throwing in a 2 things when you feel class kind of lagging in the middle of a lecture, that doesn't require any additional prep at all. Does it take more class time? No, a brain dump could be 30 seconds. And over the long run, we all know when students remember, we can move through content more quickly. So not only do these strategies not take that much class time, they'll actually save you time in the long run. And do they take more grading? Raise your hand if you want more grading. Raise your hand. I have a lot of students. Many of you probably have 400 students. We don't want more grading. One thing I love about retrieval practice is we can give ourselves permission to not grade it at all. How cool is that? We don't have to grade everything our students retrieve. And this takes a kind of shift for us mentally and for our students. The first time my students do a brain dump and I hand out blank pieces of computer paper, I love when they come up to me at the end of class and they try to hand me their paper. And I just look at them and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, don't you want this? And I'm like, why would I want this? They're like, well, aren't you going to grade it? No, I'm not going to grade it. And that's really a weird shift. We can give ourselves permission to not grade any of this stuff at all. Of course, midterms and finals and exams involve retrieval. We'll get to that, and those are for a grade. But these short, simple activities don't have to be graded at all. Am I advocating for more tests in our classes? Absolutely not. Tests are anxiety provoking, and tests drive a lot of student motivation. But what we know about this area of research and this area and this act is retrieval practice is a learning strategy. It's not an assessment strategy. Again, summative assessments, formative assessments involve retrieval, but the more we can focus on this as a learning strategy, the more we can remove that anxiety from students and engage them in the learning process, not the assessment process. Now, what's great is we're all experts in this room. Whether you've been teaching for 1 year and you just had that huge learning curve about how to teach, or you've been teaching for 10 years or 20 or 30 years, you all are experts and you already do this. Most everyone raised their hand about Think, Pair, Share. You already do this. It's just simply taking what you already do and being a little more intentional and mindful about these small shifts. My favorite strategies I mentioned for retrieval practice is old-fashioned paper and pencil. I'm also a big fan of index cards. My students can grab an index card as they come into the classroom. I can have them take out their index cards for 2 things at some random point during class. They can write it down. And then I can collect them, I can shuffle them up, I can shuffle them back out to different students, they can write something extra, and we can do the shuffling and collecting all over again. That way you don't have students taking out their notebooks and ripping out a piece of paper, and then there's the fringe on the floor, and some people don't have pencils. Like index cards are just the easiest thing ever. I love them. Of course, there are plenty of tech tools. Kahoot is retrieval practice, Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, Slido. I miss Flip. Did anyone use Flipgrid? No. Ah, thank you. Let's chat. I really miss Flip was a video platform, like informal selfie videos that I love. So I have to revamp all my classes for something new. I've heard really good things about Padlet. Does anyone use Padlet? Okay, let's chat because I want to know more about how to use Padlet. But tech tools are great for this as well. Students can work on engage in retrieval practice asynchronously at home. I have weekly Google forms, I call them retrieval practices, but kind of like mini quizzes. And students complete these Google forms as part of their homework outside of class. And for those of you who teach online, engage students in retrieval or 2 things or ask them what they remember from class last week. One thing you can do on Zoom is to have students give them a prompt for retrieval, have them type in their response to the chat before they get into breakouts. That's the think time, and you can model that even in online settings on Zoom. So this is all very flexible, whether you're teaching in person, online, or hybrid. Here's some quotes from my students when I've asked them, what are your thoughts on retrieval practice? Retrieval practices are the bomb. Now, I think we might have used that term. This quote's obviously like 10 years old because I don't think students use this phrase anymore. But retrieval practice is the bomb. They love that we have these weekly Google Forms once a week and love that we have nothing for a final. It's the best thing ever. I've just taken generally what a final exam would look like and broken it down into these weekly Google Forms. That's it. So I have no high stakes exams. Students are not cramming for them. The first time students retrieve should not be on an exam. That should not be the first time they're retrieving. My music students, the first time they play their instruments should not be in front of 1,000 people. So we can just take or think through midterms and finals. Can you break them down into smaller learning activities rather than these big, intense, anxiety-provoking exams? Let's talk about AI. Yeah, this is a challenge. I encounter this challenge as well. Students are going to use AI. That's a fact. Students are going to use AI. I think AI can be used for a lot of good things. I use it for a lot of vacation planning. It's really good at itineraries and recipes. But students are going to use AI. So what can we do about that? We've all gotten pretty good at adjusting some of our assignments and questions. Now, with retrieval practice, it doesn't just have to be this kind of repetitive brain dump each time, or two things each time. So I have a list of 8 or 10 flexible prompts that are a little bit AI proof on my website, but I just want to share 4 of them with you. So that way you can tell, is this a student's voice? And AI can't really answer these in a very authentic way. What would you like to remember about this topic, and why is it important to you? That why AI doesn't know, or at least I hope not. So not just what do you remember or what do you want to remember, but why is it important to you? Because we know that we remember things best that we care about. So ask students, why do you want to remember this idea or topic? What is one thing I didn't ask you about that you learned? AI may or may not know all of the other things you've asked about. So this is a good way to identify what else you talked about in class or what else was covered that you didn't ask about on your exams. How does this topic relate to your favorite TV show or movie? If my college students are mentioning The Princess Bride, that would be awesome. But I don't think 18-year-olds are watching The Princess Bride these days. So if you get a sense from AI of some outdated TV show or movie, that might be a cue about whether students are retrieving and thinking about course content. And what is a question you have about this topic you would like to discuss during class? And what do you hope to learn from this discussion? Again, putting the onus on the student. What do they want to remember and learn? What do they want to talk about with their peers? And what do they want to know more about? So I hope these are some helpful, flexible retrieval practice prompts that, again, you can adapt depending on your content area. Some additional research-based tips. For retrieval practice, keep it flexible. I love, again, that improv of throwing it in. Keeping it quick and spacing it out helps emphasize it's for a learning process, not assessment, and keeping it low stakes and giving ourselves and our students permission to not grade it at all. Okay, how many bones are in the human body? 206, great, that was quick and I didn't grade it. Let's move on. Let's do some math. Ooh, who's good at math? Hey, oh, I love that. Your hand shot up. That was great. My music students say they're horrible at math. And I'm like, all of music is math. And they're like, well, I'm not good at calculus. Like, okay, that I can understand. So let's see how we do. I'm going to give you 3 word problems, and you can just say the answer out loud. First word problem. Sam has 6 boxes and 3 apples in each box. How many apples does Sam have? 18. Jamie has 4 boxes and 25 mangoes in each box. How many mangoes does Jamie have? 100. And third one, Alex has 5 boxes and 10 bananas. How many bananas does Alex have in each box? It's not 50. It could be 2, it could be unknown. Okay, this is what when I was a kid, teachers called plug and chug. The first one's multiplication, the second one's multiplication, so obviously the third one must be as well, but it's not. What we typically do in math classes, in STEM classes, in skills-based classes, is we use a strategy called blocking. I took a Spanish class where we learned nouns. We were on some unit about nouns. And we learned the nouns for everyday objects, table, chair, tree. We learned the nouns for fruits and vegetables, and then we learned the nouns for jobs and occupations. That's blocking, going through a concept one by one. A really helpful learning strategy based on a lot of research is called interleaving or interweaving like a basket, is to mix up the order of concepts. I really wish my Spanish teacher then started just giving us Spanish words that were mixed up between those 3 different concepts. Research on art history shows that if students are learning paintings, they're more likely to identify new paintings if they were in a mixed up order, as opposed to if students learned paintings by Manet and then Monet and then Renoir. In a study, or I've forgotten, from the 60s maybe on baseball, batters are better able to anticipate pitches when they come at them in a mixed up order. So rather than batters learning how to hit fastballs and then curveballs and then changeups, is they should literally get those pitches in a mixed up order to hit. As my colleague, Dr. Veronica Yan says, the world comes at us interleaved. And our midterms and exams or finals are typically interleaved. So as part of lessons or as part of homework, take what you already give students and see if you can just mix up the order a bit. That's gonna be a little disorienting, but that challenge is good for learning. We learn from our mistakes. So see if there's some content you have where you can include interleaving. Some additional tips for interleaving that I think are helpful, especially for the type of content that many of you teach in the School of Medicine and in STEM classes, is again to mix up similar concepts, but also to mix up the order. If medical students are learning diagnoses, I assume there's a particular order they go in of steps to look at, or maybe in dentistry, a particular order of steps to perform. And then once they get that is to try to mix it up. With my music students at Berkeley, if they are learning a new piece of music and they played the piece of music all the way through and that's how they practice the song, which part of the song do you think they get the best at? The beginning. And then they learn the end. And then that stuff in the middle is kind of murky. I can tell you the beginning of The Princess Bride and the end of The Princess Bride, but sequentially the scenes of The Princess Bride in the middle are a little mixed up. And Dana, did you say it's your favorite movie too? Yeah. So mixing up the middle sequential order of steps can also be very helpful. This is as simple as having students shuffle a flashcard deck. If they're using Anki or I'm suddenly blanking on the other flashcard, a Quizlet, is to just shuffle the flashcard deck. And this improves discrimination, comparing and contrasting. Oh, is this word problem multiplication? Or should it be addition or should it be subtraction? Otherwise, then students don't have an opportunity if they know, or I knew, we're going from everyday objects to fruits and vegetables to occupations. We want our students to be able to discriminate, and again, it improves that muddy middle of a novel, for example. In literature classes, ask students what they remember from the middle of a book. In history, ask students to retrieve or think about not just chronological order, but stuff from the middle. There's this great research by my PhD advisor, Roddy Roediger, where if you ask US citizens the order of, to recall all of the US presidents, they remember the first few presidents and the most recent few presidents, but not the middle. There is one exception with a spike in the middle. Can you think of who that might be? Abraham Lincoln, right? But we don't really talk about those middle presidents. And if we were to mix up the order of chronological historical facts or events, that would also help students' long-term learning. If you've had your students say, but I studied for hours, raise your hand. Yeah, let me give you some tips. Our students struggle with studying. And in a lot of our classes in higher ed and college, there can be a fire hose of content they need to study. And I'm happy to chat more about how to take all that content and narrow it down a bit. Here are 3 questions I encourage you to ask your students in any class that you teach. This is, of course, how do you study? That was something I had never thought of until college. I really wish someone had asked me this in grade school or high school. It's just, how do you study? And then, why do you study that way? Did a parent teach you? Did a teacher teach you? A coach? Or did you just kind of figure out what worked best for you? So how do you study? Why do you study that way? And does it work? And then my students will pause and go, kinda? Because they know it can work, but not in an optimal way. What students overwhelmingly report doing is, if, let's say, you teach a lesson or a lecture, students have an exam at the end of the month, the vast majority of students cram. They study their books, they look through their notes right before the exam. The night before, like I did, maybe a few days before, but most students cram. And to return to the strategy I'd mentioned of spacing, if students can develop a study plan to space out their studying Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they will not only do better on that exam, they will then have stronger memories the next time they return to that content. For example, if you have a cumulative exam, that involves some spacing. Students can still cram for a cumulative exam. Right? Encouraging students to space things out along the way. Or with my weekly retrieval practices, I ask students, what do you remember from our topic 4 weeks ago? What do you remember from our topic on the first day of class? I can't control what students do at home. You can't control what students do when they're studying. But in our classroom, we can also model some of these strategies, asking students to recall things from the past, modeling brain dumps or 2 things. If we got our students to write down a list of 2 things when they studied at the end of the week, and they had a list of 30 cool things they learned in college every semester, that would be neat. So the more we can model these strategies for ourselves, the more I hope you can encourage your students to do this at home. Oh, sorry, there's my little spacing diagram. Okay. Metacognition. If you've heard the phrase, that's so meta. Metacognition is thinking about your own thinking. One aspect of cramming is that it gives students this false sense of security, what we call an illusion of confidence. Oh, I crammed. I know this. I'm going into the exam well prepared. And then they bomb it and say, but I studied for hours. These easy strategies of getting information in affect students' metacognition. What we find in the literature is students are often overconfident, but then their metacognition, they're often overconfident, but their accuracy or memory is very low. And we've probably had students who really nail that exam, but their confidence is really low. And retrieval practice brings those 2 things in line. We call it calibration and resolution, is we want our students to really know what they know and to know what they don't know, and to study appropriately, not just to cram the easy stuff or to focus on what they think they know. So we want students to better develop their metacognition. One simple thing you can do is to add checkboxes. If you have a written exam, I did this before the pandemic when my Google Forms were written out, is to just have checkboxes. And each time a student answers a question, have them just checkbox, I got it, or I'm not sure. I'm highly confident, or I don't know. Smiley face, sad face. It sounds really silly, but it engages students in a very quick method of metacognition. Explain what you're doing and the intention of this, and I strongly encourage you to not grade these checkboxes. These have nothing to do with students' grades or accuracy. This is part of the learning process for students and their metacognition. You can also ask students, how confident are you going into this exam? How confident are you that you understand the process of mitosis? How much of this lesson do you predict you'll remember next week? So judgments of learning, judgments of confidence, predictions of learning are all great ways to encourage students in their metacognition. Here is another strategy I hope you will model in your classes. I've had my students try it out in my class, and then they start adopting this at home. And it's what I call retrieve taking. Rather than note taking, we can have students retrieve their notes. At home, if students are reading a textbook, watching asynchronous lessons, they should not take notes simultaneously. I published research on this. What happens is if we're trying to learn something and we're taking notes at the same time, that's what I call multi-failing. That's not going to work. Students should be paying attention to that content and then pause reading or pause the video, retrieve their notes, write down what are 3 things you just learned from that video or that reading, and then continue studying. So they still have notes. It doesn't take any extra time. It's just simply switching from taking notes simultaneously during a lecture, for example, to you encouraging them to not take notes, pausing during a lecture so they can take their notes, and then continuing. Does that make sense? So retrieve taking rather than note taking. So let's model this and try this out. Okay, thank you. What I'd like us to do, thank you, Carrie, while she's getting that pulled up, is I invite you to take out pieces of paper, your laptop, your cell phone, and we're gonna do a brain dump. So I'll give you about 4 minutes to write down everything you've just learned about the science of learning. I've been chatting with you for about 30 minutes. And professional development, we've all had this experience where we're energized, we have ideas, and then it goes out the window, we forget it too. I want you to remember your day today. So please take a few minutes to write down everything you can remember that you've learned about the science of learning. Okay, we'll go ahead and continue when you're ready. Thank you. So, if you remembered more than you expected, raise your hand. If you forgot more than you expected, raise your hand. That's okay. That's okay. Forgetting is normal. So something I've been talking about a lot lately is to normalize this for us and for our students. When our students forget that fire hose of content, that's normal. Even if students forget something really important that you want them to remember, that's normal. We're going to forget a lot of names today. That's normal as you meet new people. I've forgotten what I did 2 weeks ago. I couldn't remember some of the cities I visited in Japan. I can't tell you what was in the episode of 6 Feet Under 3 days ago that I watched. Forgetting is normal, and forgetting is a good thing for learning. This is why music students and musicians practice in a spaced out way. They don't cram right the night before a gig or a performance. They know they have to practice on a Monday, for example, and let it simmer and forget. And then practice on a Tuesday and let themselves simmer and forget. And then Wednesday and so on. Forgetting is good for learning, which can be understandably counterintuitive. But we need to normalize this for us and our students. An analogy from neuroscience that I really like is what we call pruning. In a literal sense in neuroscience, pruning is kind of getting rid of cells that we don't need from our brain. But also when our students forget, it's like pruning one of these beautiful trees you have on campus. That's what landscapers do, is they prune trees and plants so that they can grow more effectively, more efficiently, more beautifully. So forgetting and pruning is good for learning. It's okay. Maybe you and your students develop some phrases in class, just like a simple oops, as opposed to I'm so sorry I forgot your name. Or just like a, oh, I pruned that. And have another student remind them. Okay. Speaking of which, with your brain dumps, let's do a little think, pair, share. You've now had time to think, find a buddy at your table, introduce yourselves if you don't know them, and with your buddy, chat about what you remembered about the science of learning. You got about 1 minute. Go for it. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue when you're ready. Good? Okay. Thank you. So we did some think time. We did the think time, you did the brain dump. Then we did kind of a pair and share with each other, and I saw some tables shared at the table. How did that feel? So I'm intentionally modeling what this could look like so that you can intentionally model it in your classrooms, so that you can intentionally encourage your students to do this at home as study strategies. A few more tips, especially for our students who might get nervous. They might take some buy-in. They might be skeptical. We're all creatures of habit. That's how humans work. We're creatures of habit, right? And one second. And in that way, I definitely know that it can take some getting buy-in from students, especially for the content-heavy courses. So here are 3 things I found that are really helpful to get buy-in from students. One, it can take a minute or less. Guess what? This applies for us too. But for our students, it can take a minute or less. Write down 2 things you remember after they're done studying, before they exercise, sleep, go to the gym. It can take a minute or less. It boosts their long-term learning. Just how we don't have to keep reteaching, the more students engage in these strategies, the less they have to keep restudying. And also, don't they want to learn from all their time, energy, and money that they're spending in college and graduate education? If they value the process of college, which our students do, just like we do as teachers, emphasizing, hey, this is what you can do so you remember stuff from college. I don't remember a whole lot from college. Please don't tell my mom, who paid a lot of money. I don't remember a whole lot, but our students genuinely want to remember things. So emphasizing these strategies don't take much extra time, and it can boost their long-term learning, and it can save them time. This is big, especially med students. If they can save time while they're prepping for their big exams, that's a really good thing because they don't have to keep restudying. By the time they get to that cumulative exam, they're ready to go. They know what they know what they need to focus on. They can jump right in without having to revisit material from weeks ago. So I hope this is helpful for some buy-in for students. Guess what? I know something you can do to save yourself time while studying. They're like, ooh, tell me more. I'm like, yeah, and it's all based on research. And they're like, no, I don't want that. Just tell me how to do it, okay? But these strategies can save them time as well. Here's another quote from a student a quote from a student on one of my course surveys at the end of the semester. Retrieval practice reframes how I reflect on information so I have the best chance of success. What I've learned feels more solidified, and retrieval practice makes it easier to retrieve in the future. This is really cool. At the beginning of the semester, when I tell my students there are no high stakes exams or papers, they're like, oh, this is going to be a blow off class. Easy A. I'm like, no, no, no. You're going to have a lot of weekly assignments. And we were chatting about how this structure works. I'm happy to share my syllabi. Again, stop by my classes. It takes some buy-in at the beginning of like, I just want you to lecture at me. Like, no, I'm not going to just lecture at my students. They're going to be actively participating. And as we had discussed before, you already do this in your classrooms as well. You already have students participating and discussing. But the idea of having them use their brain a little bit more is going to take some of these tips to get them there. So just because it seems like it's not working yet for them, or if it seems like it's not working yet for you, it's kind of like the first week when you exercise, where it's like, oh my gosh, this is both a pain and I'm not getting anywhere. I want to acknowledge it may take some time to get your students to buy into it and to get them to adopt these strategies at home. So engaging them, another way you can model this is giving some content that is like absolutely grade free for them to try the retrieve taking instead of note taking. Or to reassure them, like I mentioned, there's a recording, the slides are available. So let's just try out this retrieve taking instead of note taking during the lecture. Now we've got some time for the Q&A, but the QR code didn't pop up. If you go to retrievalpractice.org/Tufts and then click on Ask a Question. Sorry, I'll pull it up in a second. Does that, if you pull it up on a laptop or a phone, retrievalpractice.org/Tufts. Now we're gonna have some time for a Q&A. I just use a platform called Slido. So let me pull that up for in a moment. But now is a good time to type in any questions, and we've got just about 5 or 7 minutes to do that. So if you go again to retrievalpractice.org/Tufts, there is a button that says Ask a Question. You can also upvote questions, which is helpful for when you can also upvote questions. I know we often in our classes will have situations where students will ask a question that only pertains to them. So the upvote feature is very nice. Okay, and here's the QR code. Sorry about that. One minute to go to add a question or to upvote questions. You can also use this to put in any tips, resources, feedback for me. Another reason why I like that, using this for my classes, it's anonymous, students can upvote, they feel comfortable providing questions in this way rather than in a classroom full of other people. And for accessibility, it really helps. Okay, you can keep typing in questions, but I'll go ahead and start answering some as well. Your talk is about knowledge retrieval to enhance memory. But what about applying knowledge? How effective is applying knowledge compared to retrieving it? I love this. This probably happens to all of us where a student asks a question and you're like, It's literally on the next slide. So this is literally on the next slide, but I'll address it now. Of course, applying knowledge is really important. It's absolutely important. Sometimes I refer to like this holy grail of education is getting students to apply and transfer their knowledge. One way to consider this process is that in order to have students think, they have to have something to think about. So I think that first step is encoding or is blocking, as we were talking about, is getting information into students' heads so they have something to think about. And then, of course, that thinking process, the applying and transfer is so key. I want my students, for example, I spend a lot of time in my classes on science literacy. How do they know it's just a bunch of bunk? How can they tell what's a neuromyth? How they can tell if someone's just using their perceived authority to get human beings to trust them. I love that. And I want them to apply and transfer that knowledge. Retrieval practice, I know sounds very simplistic for memorization, for example. Tons of research shows that it's one of the best ways to help students apply their knowledge. I've also conducted research looking at kind of your typical Bloom's taxonomy with the triangle and all the application stuff. Well, kind of has application near the bottom, but then synthesis, analysis, creation. One of the best important ways to help students with the application and transfer of knowledge is to give them the opportunities to do that for practice. It might be, for example, on an exam, you ask application or transfer questions, but how often do you engage students in those questions on their homework? We want to give them practice for these processes of application as well. In my new book I have somewhere, which is also very short. It's very short. I love that it's short. And it's an edited book of research, but also practical teaching tips from 10 other cognitive scientists. My colleague, Dr. Stephen Pan, talks about how transfer is hard. Transfer's hard. This is something human beings are not good at. Just like we multi-fail, we cannot transfer knowledge, or at least it's very difficult. So first of all, please give yourselves grace when it seems like your students aren't applying their knowledge. Another thing you can do is to scaffold that or provide them hints. There's this research study from the 1980s where students were taught about, let's see, in what order did it happen? Students were taught about like a war situation where a bunch of generals had to take down a castle or a fort. And in the study, when students learned that they couldn't all take all of the wow, I need more coffee. The military personnel or the, give me a word for like fighters. Troops, thank you, troops. The troops, they couldn't all go on one road. They had to come at this fort from multiple roads. Then they're given a question of, here's a radiology problem. There's this cancer tumor. You have to irradiate it. But if you use too much radiation, it's going to destroy all the tissue. The simple answer is, well, they have to radiate in small parts from different angles, just like in the military example. But students couldn't even do that. But when they were given a hint of, hey, that example, one of those examples we just talked about applies to this radiology problem, then they were able to apply and transfer that knowledge. So I think giving practice with application questions, giving ourselves grace that it's hard, and giving hints is a good thing without us getting frustrated. But of course, retrieving it in the first place rather than just expecting students to do it the first time on an exam can be tough. I'm a big note taker. I'm afraid I will miss important details if I don't take notes. What do you suggest for people like me? I love this and I want to write about it more because I can understand the feeling that if you don't take notes, you'll miss important details. But the flip side is if you do take notes, you're missing important details. It's that multi-failing. Trying to listen to me or students trying to listen to you during a lecture without taking notes is uncomfortable because of this. I had a faculty member recently call this learning FOMO, which I love. Isn't that good? Learning FOMO. So with that retrieve taking strategy, for example, your students might experience this learning FOMO. I'm gonna miss something. And that's where having the materials can be a helpful comfort blanket. I will give you the slides, I will give you the recording. You can go back and look at the transcripts. But yeah, you're gonna miss stuff if you're taking notes. And yeah, you're gonna miss stuff if you're not taking notes. Another aspect of this is that retrieval practice has been beneficial for students with ADHD. Students with dyslexia, students with learning disabilities, and by including short activities with index cards or Kahoot or other tech tools, it helps keep people focused. So if part of the intention of note-taking is trying to maintain attention, there are ways to use short breaks to help students pay attention and stay on task and actually listen to the lecture rather than trying to take everything down. So I think part of this, the onus on us in the classroom, is providing students with a list of key terms or a list of a game plan or an agenda, or the slides maybe pared down a bit. My colleague Patrice Bain in our book Powerful Teaching talks about taking study guides and turning them into retrieval guides. So rather than giving students a study guide before an exam with all of the key things you want them to know, is give them the exact same thing, but like delete a few words or just turn them into questions. Again, it's gonna frustrate your students and it will take some buy-in if you do this. And that does take some prep. But if you give students materials on which they know they can rely after the fact, they will feel more comfortable getting rid of this note-taking process. You didn't take notes for the first half hour of this talk. How did that feel? Sorry? Overwhelming? FOMO. Oh, great. Yeah, this learning FOMO. Isn't that fun? And that's okay because we're gonna forget things and you can't pay attention to all the things, especially if you're taking notes. You just can't. Think about when students are taking notes while reading a textbook and then they don't remember what they literally just read. It's because they're taking notes, as opposed to if they read a paragraph and then write down one thing about that paragraph, they will remember it better. So yeah, you might miss some important details if you don't take notes, but promise me you'll miss details if you do take notes. It's kind of a catch-22. How do you balance between low stakes assessments and accountability in students? Yes, and we were chatting about this here as well. More specifically, I have sort of in my classes, depending on the class, let's say they get 300 total points. This could be a percentages as well. 300 total points. I have 3 categories of assignments. One is the Google Forms, one is a discussion board, weekly posts, and one might be an in-class group project. Oh, I could talk forever about how to make group projects better. But they're in-class weekly assignments, even for the group projects. And when you add those up, I have a 15-week semester, 15, I can't do the math, 150. And then I drop a few assignments as well. We don't have assignments the first week and some other weeks. So essentially, I've got 300 points, 100 for category 1, 100 for category 2, 100 for category 3. This is similar to specs grading or specifications grading. CELT has resources on specs grading or can fill you in on that as well. Because students have these small weekly assignments, they're only about 2% of their grade. And I find that over time, this actually increases their accountability. They're more likely to complete them because they're like, I'll make an attempt. And if I don't do well, it gets dropped. Or if I don't do well, it's not going to tank my grade. So when my assignments are small and weekly and they're able to keep up, I have some other policies on late stuff and extra credit and whatever, but it keeps them actually more accountable for their learning and for completing the assignments. With accountability with high stakes exams, one way to think about it is whether the exam is assessing learning or if it's assessing cramming. Chances are you're assessing cramming. With smaller assignments, even if you take an exam and break it up into 4 smaller exams, you're holding students accountable for spacing out their studying. And they still have to complete the exams. Again, we can't control what students do when they go home. We can motivate them with points. Students want grades. Somebody recently told me grades are students' love language. They are. That's how we motivate students. That's never going to go away. AI is not going away anytime soon. Grades aren't going away anytime soon. But I do feel that smaller assignments actually hold students more accountable for their learning and more accountable and motivated for being a part of that class. If you want to motivate students with high stakes exams, that makes sense to me. That will get them to show up, I hope, for those exams. Just keep in mind about what the objective and the intention and the goal is of those high stakes assessments. So it's definitely a balance, and I can understand not throwing out everything and redesigning your course, but I think accountability depends on how you define it and how your students define it. I ask my students, what grade do you want to get in this class? Great, here are how many points you have to complete in order to get that grade. I teach engineering, and basically all of the content builds on previous content. How do you suggest I implement interleaving in this context? Yes, interleaving is a very hyper-specific strategy that helps with some skills-based learning and some vocabulary learning. In engineering, it might be that you can't interleave the order of content because it all builds on previous content. But if there are key concepts, like in calculus, I'm thinking about the difference between integrals and derivatives. You learn the process for, I don't remember this. Does anybody remember calculus or teach calc? Okay, see, I don't remember stuff from college and high school. You can help me. There might be a process you learn for how to calculate integrals and how to calculate derivatives, but then eventually students need to remember the distinction. Or in my class, I want them to remember the distinction between REM cycles and circadian rhythms. Or I want them to remember differences, well, Jean and I were talking about literature. You might want them to remember different themes. So even though, of course, a book builds on its previous content, you read books in order, in literature, you could then interleave the themes. What's a theme you remember from this novel? What's a theme you remember from this nonfiction book? What's a theme you remember from this poetry? Even if you're starting to mix up similar concepts or related concepts, improves that discrimination. So I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but this is where your creativity comes in. But I do think in engineering as well, if there are any concepts that are somewhat related, it doesn't have to be mixing up the order of things, maybe just mixing up what they remembered about, gosh, I'm blanking on engineering concepts too. We can chat more. I might need some more concrete examples, but again, it's the creativity of, are there key terms or content or units you can interleave, or is there a process of steps, like completing a formula that you could interleave? There's also a chapter in the new book all about interleaving, so I hope that's helpful as well. Love the idea of retrieval practice. Any advice for the retrieval practice in classes of over 200? Yes. Again, another chapter from my colleague, Dr. Janelle Blunt in this book. She talks about whiteboards. Having portable individual whiteboards. You can also make these with a piece of paper and a page protector, or cardstock and a page protector, and get dry erase markers. With 200 students, if you don't have access to clickers, for example, or you don't want them on your cell phones completing a Kahoot, whiteboards are great because they can just jot down some answers. And Dr. Blunt talks, as she's at Anderson University in Indiana, she talks about how the whiteboards also normalize mistakes. I really like that idea, is normalizing the mistakes. So even in a class of 200, you could give students think time to think before the think, pair, share. That's retrieval. We call that covert retrieval, by the way, in your head, like a covert operation. It's covert retrieval. In a class of 200 students, it'll feel weird, but we've got a room of maybe 100 people, and you all were silent for a solid 4 minutes. That was cool. It looked like you were taking an exam, by the way. So even with 200 students, give students a prompt they can close their eyes to retrieve and then continue. It's very flexible for small classes and for large classes. I'm gonna go through one more question very, very quickly. When do students take the leap toward deep learning from the retrieval process? Ooh, I think this comes back to the application and transfer question. This is one aspect where I really like having students choose topics for a variety of projects. In one class, I have students do a video project. They get to choose their own scientific article. And that's where, based on what they've learned in class, they can then read that research article that they themselves have chosen that they want to engage in deep learning about. So I know that was brief, but I will send these questions to CELT and they can help answer them. Very briefly, as I mentioned, I've taken 100 questions and 100 years of research and distilled it into 4 pictures. Recently, my colleagues and I conducted a literature review of 50 classroom experiments on retrieval practice, not laboratory research, real classroom research. And it works. For 5th graders, for med students, for dentistry, for science, for psychology, for history, facts, retrieval practice consistently benefited students' long-term learning. Most lab research is on the order of like midterm learning or short-term learning. Retrieval practice consistently benefited students' learning in real classrooms. As I mentioned from that very first setup Slido question, retrieval improves complex, deeper learning. Med students who practice CPR perform CPR better than just reading the instructions. CPR is kind of a complex process. Retrieval practice reduces student anxiety. We surveyed more than 1,000 students, and the majority of students, 80+%, said that retrieval practice reduced their anxiety because they were better prepared for exams. They didn't have to cram. I wanted to mention this is the current field of cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience and cognitive science. My colleagues are from all over the world, women, people of color, LGBTQ scientists. We have a few of them in Boston. Ruth Ann Thomas is at the Teaching Center at MIT. So I hope you will check that out. I was gonna go through 10 tips from the new book, but you'll just have to check out the new book, sorry. So imagine what this looks like at Tufts for our students in this world climate, when our students remember, when they have something to think about, when our students might look confused or frustrated, but that this is good for learning. When we start seeing this in our classrooms, or a student says, my brain hurts, that's good for learning. Imagine what it looks like when our students feel successful, when they're ready to take upper level classes, when they're thinking about graduate school. Focusing on getting information out of students' heads helps them be successful. So rather than focusing on encoding like our students typically do, they themselves as study strategies can focus on retrieving. And for us, rather than this frustrating cycle of forgetting and reteaching, we can move to learning and celebrating learning. So how many bones are in the human body? 206. So you can retrieve as well. Thank you so much for your full attention and have a great day today. Thank you.
I'm just going to transition us to the next activity, but before I do that, I want to have everyone give Dr. Agarwal a wonderful thanks for this talk and for coming here today and for answering your questions. We have a little gift for you from us at Tufts, and we just thank you for coming here and doing such a wonderful job. This topic was really among the most popular we've had. We had 200 people register for this event, which again breaks the record of the last 5 years. And we had more than 70 people in the Zoom online. So those of you in the room see a full room, but those of you online are also seeing a full room. In addition to thank you for Dr. Agarwal, I just want to thank Media Services again, because this classroom is not yet installed with the full media, so we made do today, and thank you for those of you online with your patience with, we had a little bit of a problem with connection. They brought in a wonderful screen for us to use, and I know it wasn't big and bright and perfect, but I think we did well to be in this beautiful space. So to just close us out, now we're going to have a refreshment break, and the refreshment break will be for the next 15 minutes. Dr. Agarwal has generously agreed to stick around, so you can come up and ask her questions. If you brought a copy of her book, I'm sure she would sign it for you. And snacks will be available in the back of the room. We've refreshed the snacks because lunch isn't until 1 p.m. We want you to feel free to have some snacks. Please do wait till 11 a.m. to go find the workshop rooms, because our workshop presenters will be setting up now, so give them a chance to do so. We have concurrent sessions at 11 and 12. At 11 a.m., we have 5 different sessions. 2 of them are virtual. Jean is going to share in the chat the link to the program again. For those of you attending a virtual roundtable, it's not the same Zoom room. It's a different Zoom room. If anybody in the room wanted to attend a virtual session, you could stay in this room if you had headphones and join one. But you'll need to go to the program to find the links to these. In this building, we have a roundtable navigating the information maze, understanding reading, writing, and research skills in the digital age. That's in Eaton 201. So as you leave this room and you just cross to the hallway there past the bathrooms, if you go all the way down to the end of the hallway, turn left, just follow the hallway to its end. That's where you'll find navigating the information maze. We'll have enhancing engagement and collaboration with Perusal and Padlet workshop. That's in Eaton 215. Again, if you just cross down that hallway at the corner where the hallway turns is where you'll find Classroom 215. And then the workshop on undergraduate learning assistance will be in Eaton 225, which is the first classroom you come to as you start walking down that hallway. And then we have 2 online, which are globalizing health education and our first short talk sessions of the day, which is one around setting students up for graduate school success and the impacts of pedagogical partners. At noon, we'll have 4 more workshop options. Again, in person, there will be 3. The first short talk session is in Eaton 201, which again is at the end of the hallway as you go all the way down, and we'll have 3 different talks and some chance for questions in that room. We'll have a workshop on transforming social emotional learning in Eaton 215, which is again at the corner of the hallway as you're walking down. And the workshop about assessment strategies in the age of AI, where we'll have a faculty roundtable, is at that first. And then online, we'll have empowering student learning, adapting program-wise Canvas design with a focus on inclusion, accessibility, and individual creativity. So this is the map. We're in 250 and 260 right here. And then as you cross the hall, 225 is there, 215 is in the corner, and 201 is at the last corner. Just want to go back to the schedule and mention that we'll come back to this room at 1 o'clock for the lunch and awards ceremonies. We have some folks who have allergies in the room. Catering has done a wonderful job meeting those allergy needs, but we'll just ask if you have allergies not to wait in line with everybody else, but come right up to the table because we'll have you go first so that the allergen sensitive food isn't disappeared by the time everybody has gone through the line. I think that was it. Did I miss anything, Heather? All right, let's take a wonderful 15-minute break, and please help yourself to food and snacks, and then we'll find the workshop rooms. Thank you.